This is a video about Anime-Gataris. Anime is pretty meta. By way of the process behind its production and the nature of its relationship to its audience with the niche demographics it targets, anime is, simply put, an incredibly self-referential medium. Be it fourth wall breaks, overt references, or evident influences, for better or worse it became and has long been an inescapable aspect of anime. But that leaves the question, what does being meta mean, exactly? Essentially, what can a work's own self-acknowledgement say? What does or can it express about the people behind it and the community it is aimed at? One of the more evident and harshly criticized usages is that which functions, essentially, as an excuse, at least insofar as the audience perceives. To have a character operate within all the functions of their archetype and then have the show itself acknowledge the fact it is doing so comes across as a weak attempt at justifying one's own unoriginality without actually adding anything substantial. However, better works can use this understanding of the medium and genres it falls into to both deliver upon and subvert expectations, sometimes without even making any explicit reference to the fact that it is doing so. Beyond character traits and story beats alone, though, is the more obvious element: explicit references to other works. Haruhi outfits in Lucky Star, and AT Field and Barakamon, like all of Space Patrol Luluko. These are aspects that, if you are familiar with what they're referencing, you definitely won't miss. And oftentimes, even if you aren't, the fact that they are at least making a reference remains pretty clear. An uncharitable reading of scenes like these would be to call them lazy and cheap, piggybacking off of the established quality of and love for other works in order to try to appeal to anime viewers. However, I think there's a much more nuanced and interesting potential reading towards the usage of meta aspects within a work. To reference works outside of oneself, either through acknowledgement and/or subversion of pervasive trends, or with direct nods to pre-existing media, is to break the illusion of a particular piece existing purely within itself. Now the fact that it is a product and contributor to a long line of art both taking and giving influence is clear. The work is placing itself within something larger and asking the audience to play along. In fact, it is directly acknowledging the role that the audience plays, looking beyond the perception of them as a mere passive observer. As far as my experience runs, anime in particular seems more vocally aware of its audience and the relationship it bears with it than most other markets, likely due to its focus on niche appeal. The degrees of separation are so much less, not between the artist and audience, but between the art and the audience. The perception of this community as an ongoing conversation between that which is created and those that are consuming it. My belief is that when a show is utilizing that which is meta, it is for the purpose of creating a communal sensation with the viewer, that this one work is a part of a broader culture, inviting those watching into a more intimate conversation with what the artist aims to express. So, with all that established, I suppose I should actually get to the show this video is supposed to be about. Anime-Gataris is a 12-episode anime that aired in fall 2017. Directed by Kenshiro Mori and with series composition by Mitsutaka Hirota, the initial premise is as follows. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Actually, don't, because you'll stop me every other word. Is there anyone who actually says that and has any intention of being stopped anyway? Minoa Asagaya is a high school girl without any particular interests or passions. However, this all changes when she gets drawn into the wide world of anime, and together with some newfound friends forms the anime club. They must enjoy their school life to the fullest, expressing their love for anime and otaku culture, all while avoiding being shut down by the oppressive student council. But obviously, if that's all the show was, I wouldn't be talking about it today, because Anime-Gataris is kind of insane. In order to talk with any depth, I'm going to have to give a brief summary and light analysis of the plot for each episode, which means, yes, spoilers, but it's not like you were going to watch the show anyways. Episode 1 introduces us to the aforementioned Minoa Asagaya, first depicting her watching a Macross-esque anime as a kid with fascination, followed by this dream fading at the sound of her alarm. She's overslept and rushes to get prepared as an upbeat rock-styled piece plays beneath. Through her dialogue with her family as they eat breakfast and prepare to go about their day, we are presented with some more information as to what kind of person Minoa is. She's not athletic, in fact she's one to prefer indoors to out, is a bit airheaded, and is extremely curious about the anime that she remembered in her dream. Fast forwarding a bit, we're introduced to 3 classmates of Minoa's, the athletic Yui Obata, the timid and quiet Miko Koenji, and the beautiful, difficult to approach rich girl Alice Kamigusa. Minoa asks Yui what motivated her to join the track and field club, and she says she was moved at seeing a broadcast of the Olympics as a child. This plays into Minoa's having been touched by the anime she watched as a kid, and the fact that there is one she's curious about becomes a point of conversation. Alice, overhearing this, asks to meet with Minoa later, and ultimately we find that Alice herself is a massive anime fan, and was excited at the prospect of some potential kinship. Though she is disappointed to find Minoa has little knowledge or experience with anime, Minoa is touched by the great passion Alice expresses, and shows an interest in learning more, with the hope of being able to discover what that anime she saw as a child was. Minoa drags Alice to the anime club room, and though they find it has been inactive for some time, they decide to reform the club and find new members. While cleaning up the room, Minoa opens a curious looking door, finding inside a beret and a goofy looking cat. After leaving, she realizes she forgot her phone, and in her rush back ends up dropping the beret she snagged from the club room. At her return, the cat speaks to her, and with her expression of utter shock, we cut to the ED. The first episode in many ways serves as a sort of thesis statement for what I think makes this show so interesting, despite many little details that will only make sense later, and it being far less bombastic than the series' conclusion. There's a very distinct, poignant tonal disconnect. Quiet, introspective moments where the camera pans slowly and the soundtrack steps back, the sound design growing more intimate, are interrupted without warning by rote, upbeat pacing and a complete shift of mood, as if the show is remembering what it was supposed to be doing, that it was supposed to be following the cliched tropes. There's plenty enough here to raise an eyebrow, yet because of how it presents itself, it doesn't really give you the chance to get any grip on what it is, to really lock down what it's going for. It definitely gives you a taste of the weirdness, such as with the talking cat, the mysterious beret, and 2 cutaways to a seemingly random dude sitting at a bench, in the final of which where he picks up the beret after Minoa drops it. But again, because of how it spaces things out, and how much of it does play into one's expectations of a clubroom comedy, you're left just trying to figure out where on the scale it's placing its sense of realism, since plenty of these types of shows do lean more towards the cartoonish and absurd. Alright, so I'm editing this video right now, and I've seen this show twice, right? First time I watched it, I got the idea, and then when I finally went to make this video, I rewatched the whole series. And but while editing, I came across this one clip where we see in the first episode it sort of scrolls over all the future club members that'll be joining the club. But something that I didn't recognize before stood out to me. So like this person, I recognize her. She joins the club. She joins the club. He joins the club. This dude joins the club. Who's this guy? Who is he? Like, I don't remember this guy showing up at all later in the series, or having any role later in the series, unless I'm totally forgetting him. This is a call to action. If you are one of the 10 people that watch the show, and you remember who this dude is, why is he in this shot? I don't understand it. Most of the stuff in this show makes sense, but there's a couple things in this show that I don't understand the reasoning behind, and I'm not mad, I'm just curious. Episode 2 has Minoa and Alice scouting for new club members by way of an obvious nod to Haruhi's doing such, and they find the rest of the cast with surprising ease. Let me give them all a brief introduction so you know their names. There's the aforementioned Miko Koenji, whose interest lies primarily in light novels, Erika Aoyama, the senior and one appointed club president who's cool, calm, and loves cosplay. Next is Kai Musashi Sakai, a goofy chuny with occasional self-awareness, and finally Koki Nakano. He's attractive and beloved by the whole school, but secretly holds a huge love for idol anime. As the group gets to know each other, a brief conflict occurs between Alice and Miko over the importance of source material. Miko, as a light novel fan, obviously places more value in it than Alice. However, it is ultimately resolved thanks to mediation from Minoa, reiterating this thematic undercurrent of one's own passions in her speech, as she tries to get them to understand each other a little better and recognize that they will inevitably want to share and discuss that which they are passionate about, and everyone will have different interests specific to them. A sudden twist comes at the episode's conclusion. The student council is shutting them down. Episode 3 picks up following the events of the last. As it turns out, they were never approved, despite submitting an application, the ultimate decision lying in the hands of the student council, who view their group as meaningless. In spite of this conflict, they decide to take a group to Akiba to lighten things up, enjoying some laid-back humorous antics as we get to know their dynamics a little better. The conflict is picked up once more though when their advisor Goman informs them that they must explain the need for the club at an assembly taking place the next day in order to have a chance at being approved, and Minoa is appointed to do such, not exactly at her own request. She begins to give the speech but stumbles thanks to nerves and the speech written for her not being well suited to the moment. But just when all seems lost, unexpectedly Kai comes in to save the day with a dramatic speech that completely wins over the audience. I'm sure at this point many people dropped it, as Anime-Gataris is certainly not one to play its hand early, but let's continue for now. There is a lot going on under the surface that we will most definitely get to a bit later, however I think it works best to contextualize it within the framework of the show's full narrative. Following a brief dialogue about anime production committees and merchandising, episode 4 has the club interrupted once again by their new enemies, the student council. This time they're being threatened with shutdown due to Alice's overspending on anime Blu-rays, and though she offers to pay for it all herself, Erika decides that they should handle it as a club matter, and they come to the agreement that the anime club will assist other clubs for free as payment. The student council president Tsubaki questions, "What value can you offer?" similarly to her query in the last episode, but ultimately they pull through by assisting the drama club's outfitting thanks to Erika's experience with cosplay. We also discover that it seems Tsubaki and Erika used to be friends and both passionate about anime and cosplay, and that someone higher up is calling the shots on Tsubaki's actions. Summer is upon us as episode 5 follows the crew visiting Comiket. They make friends with a foreigner visiting the convention and discuss briefly the globalization of anime. Primarily centered around humor and trivia though, not too much actually happens. Episode 6 has their vacationing continue as they take a pilgrimage through a variety of locations that were showcased in anime. All this serves merely as the setting though, for an episode focused on Kai. Due to several events, Kai is beginning to believe that Miko may bear feelings for him, and his misunderstandings and nervousness at pursuing it further is what we follow. Ultimately though, the misunderstanding is just that. The only 3D Miko's interested in is male on male. This episode is particularly interesting and bizarre, due to the fact that the characters have not been sexualized much at all up until this point, so the sudden awareness of one another feels abrupt and quite shocking, especially considering Miko and Kai is not at all the pairing you would expect, Minoa bearing a much more well fleshed out dynamic with Kai. This does play into a particular theory I have with regards to the show, but I will admit it is quite an off-putting episode, especially the first time round. This is the part of the video where I try to break things up nice and leisurely, probably inflating the length of what you're watching. With that watch time, gotta keep your eyes locked and talking too much about a show that no one cares about, whereabouts, so it's just gonna have to shout, "Hey you guys, my supporters, patron people, half of them are friends, man, that should be illegal. If you finish this video and think it's pretty good, grant my wish as a kid, you're making bucks on YouTube, should I end soft, or keep on going? I never quite know where the flow is. Get a meta set, I better best and grade skate, can let a second pass without being creative. Training, harder wrecking as they kept on video making, taking my time to show the world my capability for creating. Getting harder at my own behest, no time to rest, let's lose this test. Gassed against this delayed long enough, better get back to this. Episode 6 picking up, let's see what we miss. Episode 7 presents the return of the student council impeding upon our protagonists, as their school festival proposal of an anime screening is rejected. And if they can't present anything appropriate, they will be shut down. After much debate and Minoa's proposal, they ultimately agree to make a short anime. Agreeing on the story proves difficult, however, as they all have their own interests. But after discovering some image boards that seem to be from the very same anime that Minoa saw as a child, They agree to unite their separate interests together into one project, even if it may be a bit messy. We follow their process from the endless rewrites to dubbing, and everything seems to be going swell. However, at the episode's conclusion, Tsubaki informs the student council members that other clubs shall henceforth be barred from assisting the anime club, and if they don't listen, they will be shut down. What's more, they must also fill a huge room to have their presentation deemed a success. How dramatic. Episode 8 has team morale low, with the unexpected roadblocks making completion seem impossible. Minoa takes some time to think it over, and believing that her clubmates are beginning to give up, texts them to meet at the club room for a pep talk. However, when no one replies or even shows the message as read, she's distraught and vents to the cat. Yeah, he's still in the show, remember? She lets out her frustration and expresses how deeply passionate she is about the project, even if it's far from perfect. Returning to the club room, she finds the others entering too, as it turns out that they were so busy finding ways to work around their limitations that they didn't even check their phones. They just barely managed to wrap up production with a few last-minute changes and even draw in a large crowd thanks to the help of friends and family. Sure, it kinda sucks, but it's their anime. They showed up the student council and proved the anime club's worth. What a great finale. Oh, wait, we have 4 more episodes. Episode 9 is where things really start getting weird. Following some celebration at their success, other clubs begin getting interested in anime, and turning to the anime club for suggestions, and, this is the strange part, taking influence from anime. And I don't mean just by getting pumped up, they are now introducing an array of absurd contraptions into their sports influenced by anime, and Minoa seems to be the only one off-put by this turn of events. Is it all so weird you feel like you're the only sane one? She says to the talking cat. Nakano comes in shortly after, seemingly on cue, and encourages Minoa, telling her that anime brings people together and makes them happy, and that's just what's happening right now. Minoa accepts his words and decides to play along, even as things get continually more ridiculous. After the club does a special interview, club advisor Goman is offered compensation and intends to turn it down, as taking it would be against school rules, but Nakano convinces Goman to accept it. As it turns out, Nakano is betraying the club, using Goman's acceptance as grounds to disband the club, and we finally meet the man behind it all, the principal. The club's been betrayed and disbanded, whatever will they do now? Episode 10 kicks off with a recap and an interesting OP. Moving along, we see fellow students protesting the shutdown of the anime club, to which the principal replies, "Then this school is hereby closed." He locks himself up in his room and no one can get to him, but Minoa, led by the cat, finds a secret entrance. And it is in this dialogue between the principal and Minoa that the student council's endless attempts to shut down the anime club become clear. As it turns out, the principal used to work in anime, but his directorial debut was such an enormous failure it was cancelled after 1 episode, and he left the field in shame, now resentful of anime. However, what we also discover, thanks to the tireless searching of otaku all throughout Japan, is that the anime he worked on is also the anime Minoa remembers fondly from her childhood, and when she discovers this, she is quick to express her intense love for it. Just like their school anime, it wasn't perfect, but it was the realization of someone's passions, and it meant something to her. Finally won over, the principal comes to realize that they all love anime after all, and leaves the school, presumably to try to re-enter the field, as triumphant music plays and everyone rejoices. What a nice finale. Oh wait, we have 2 more episodes. Huh. In the episode's closing, as the anime club are finally at ease, Minoa notices that the others are communicating with the cat now, but they don't seem to view it as strange in the slightest. A bit curious, she visits the principal's room and finds a yearbook from his past, and in it seems to be the one and only Nakano, looking the same as ever. Episode 11 begins by mirroring the start of the first episode in many ways, but before long Minoa begins to notice that things are pretty off. Emotive effects are now physical objects she can perceive and interact with, and she notices her family's faces randomly changing to the styles of older anime. Bringing these concerns up with her friends leaves her high and dry, as it seems she is the only one able to recognize these abnormalities. When she tries to address it once more in the club, Minoa is left out of the loop as the other members consider that maybe her issues come down to the person behind the series' composition changing, and decide to watch the opening once more to check, literally rewinding the show itself. They try to calm Minoa down, telling her that if they jump the shark too much, they'll be cancelled at episode 11. In order to prevent that, they try to decide on what genre they should fall into, with some goofy logic-breaking antics. It seems everyone's decided Minoa is the weird one, and all these events continue to be unexplained as the world she inhabits grows increasingly more insane. Her family turns to a 50s anime, a Giga Machinju shows up, barriers and super robots, and as it builds, Minoa finally rejects the insanity. After all, it's not like they're in an anime or anything. And at the query, "Are you rejecting anime?" for her questioning any aspect of it, her friends and the whole school rejects her in turn. Honestly, though you might think this arc would be funny, it comes across as unsettling and intense, seeing Minoa's gradual mental breakdown as she questions her own perception of reality. It's definitely not what I expected, but it certainly hit me. Finally, she is met with someone who seems to also have come to recognize the changes taking place. Nakano. He tells her there must be some cause behind it, and she comes to the conclusion that the cat must have something to do with it. After all, he could talk from the beginning. One of his first requests was that she not open the door he came out of, and now distrustful of him, she does precisely that. As it turns out, this was once again all part of Nakano's plan. He explodes in maniacal laughter, and a bright light flashes filling the screen. When she comes to, where the room used to be is now a brick wall. Back to the outside world, things have grown even crazier, if that's possible. Monsters, magic, and other illogical anime-inspired things abound, and still no one questions it. She finds Nakano outside and discovers that he and the cat are from the anime world, and that he will soon engulf this world in anime. The cat asks him, "Who do you work for?" and he turns to the fog from which a shadowy figure emerges. It's the man who lifted the beret, and it's the freaking director of the show. Seriously, look at this. That's just brilliant. Everyone's laughing maniacally, and it seems her world has been completely turned to anime. Well, that sucks. Episode 12 continues with some more not really all that important backstory for Nakano, and we find out that the director has spontaneously combusted after being rejected by both the anime world and the real world because he tried to claim such an ambitious story setting and wasn't capable. Nakano is enraged as he had to deal with the man to change his name to something better, clearly something he's insecure about. I should also note that around episode 8 or so, the characters suddenly start referring to Nakano almost exclusively as Aurora for no clear reason, and he absolutely detests it. Using a pair of special goggles that reveal the line art for this world, she looks to herself, afraid of becoming anime too, and seeing that she has, screams with a fade to black. Minoa comes to in the school, and it seems like things are normal once more, but that hope is pretty quickly dashed. Though everything in this world seems to be telling her to just accept it and become anime, she rejects the notion, and the world in response starts falling apart, trying to erase her. However, she does have some allies on her side, and with a dramatic insert song, she finally finds Nakano with the beret. As it turns out, people of the anime world can't use it, so his endeavors were ultimately all for naught. She takes the beret, and her friends appear before her, trying to convince her not to fix things. With the tension at its highest point, she acknowledges her love for anime and how it brought them together, but says, her speech seems to break the false personalities on her clubmates, and through their aid, they get back to the mysterious room in their club room with another insert song and a super robot. The beret, cat, and Nakano return to their world through the door, and with a flash of white, the world seems to have been fixed. Nakano finally getting the name change he's been longing for, though he doesn't seem to be too happy with Minoa's split-second decision. The anime club meet together once more, the student council is supportive, and Nakano will one day be realized again, as a proper anime this time. A true happy end, sure to have the boldest of men holding back their tears. Okay, so with that not so brief overview, trust me, I could have gone way more in depth. I could have murdered you with the details, so you better be thankful. I hope you can grasp a bit of why I find this show so interesting. It defies expectation and convention in both its narrative and structure, and at the climactic final 4 episodes, every time you think it can't get any more crazy, it somehow manages to top itself. And I could just end the video here, with a thematic introduction, plot summary, and light analysis. I think I've at least convinced you it is something interesting and worth watching, or at least worth discussing, but I'm not one to leave it at that. Because I think Anime-Gataris is far more than mere absurdity. I think Anime-Gataris has something to say. It should be evident by now that this show is extremely meta, and even with that being clear, my prior description barely even scratched the surface of such. So, with that said, let's talk a bit about how Anime-Gataris uses meta. Afterwards, we will cover what exactly it is saying with its meta, but first I need to establish how it uses it in the first place, as Anime-Gataris in particular is rather interesting in its approach, utilizing a wealth of different angles towards being meta. The most immediate and obvious tactic used in Anime-Gataris is the outright reference, of which there is an overwhelming quantity. It does use the typical Japanese self-censorship when it comes to titles, but it is still name-dropping a ton of works. It would be a genuine challenge to catalog it all, because every offhand reference or comment towards a show is always a reference to a real existing work. From Alice's list of essential beginners anime through their club discussions and beyond, it all comes from something real, even if it requires a bit of decoding. They are an anime club after all, so it's their primary point of discussion. And the show was clearly produced by someone just as passionate and knowledgeable about the medium as the characters themselves are. Alongside direct name dropping, characters will also sometimes quote or pay homage to famous lines throughout anime. From Gundam's to What a Terrifying Child from Glass Mask, and so much more. Especially poignant for a modern viewer is just how up-to-date a lot of its references are. It aired in 2017 and explicitly is set in 2016, and actually utilizes its date by having the characters respond to the time they are in, such as with them frequently talking about the hype around shows like Re:Zero and Konosuba, equally huge successes here in the West. Both of those shows still have a huge following and ongoing discussion around them today, and they're recent enough that I distinctly remember their impact on the community when they aired. So on that front, it is much easier for me to identify with it compared to older self-referential otaku media. What is fascinating about the references in Anime-Gataris is that they are deeply interconnected in a sort of three-way mix. There is the nod to the viewer, in that the show is displaying something with the purpose of an informed audience member acknowledging it. There is its relevance within the show itself, being that the characters too are anime fans who make and recognize these references as well as we do. And there is how it uses these references to mirror or comment on anime production and the anime community. You never quite know how much of any of these three lies in the balance of what the show wants you to take away. That when they drop a quote from a show, how often is it for the viewer, the characters, or both? This balance makes all the references feel totally in character and in place. A common issue with references is that they not only break immersion, but can often seem out of character. It can create a divide between the show as it normally stands and this side wink and nod to the audience. Simply put, it feels unearned and cheap. In Anime-Gataris though, it makes perfect sense that the references are being made, and as such you can drop your guard and appreciate them further, and appreciate what it does with them. The most basic core theme that one can walk away with from this show is that of interconnectedness, or the unifying passion people find in anime. We find meaningful relationships by way of a shared care for this nuanced craft. And that is at the core of what gives it meaning. That they install in us a deep love, a deep passion, and that individual love and passion can then be reflected into a broader community. Anime-Gataris very much so embraces the sensation and importance of anime as a communal experience, and its community as a place of belonging. Great value is tied to the anime club holding on to their special club room. At one of the student council's earlier attempts to disband the club, Erika suggests that they could just meet recreationally, but Minoa rejects this, emphasizing the personal importance to her of holding on to the club room. It stands as a sort of symbolic token of acceptance, a place for them to belong, to make memories and strengthen bonds. Kamika 2 is depicted as a friendly, unified gathering of like-minded individuals, and there is an explicit dialogue discussing the globalization of anime when they befriend a girl visiting from China. They are surprised at how quick translation has become, how unified it's all becoming, and appreciative of how everyone around the world can participate in this unified love. Yes, anime has value. Anime means something important to me and to so many others. That is what the characters exclaim against the tyranny of the student council and the pessimism of the principal. Latching onto something that inspires you, for Yui that first Olympic game on TV, for Minoa a childhood anime, and using that passion as a means to connect with and understand others. The club's conflicts often arise from a selfish passion and are resolved by a unified understanding, an unselfish recognition of the other's interests while still not sacrificing one's own individuality. They all have their own niche interests in the field of anime and otaku culture. However, in coming together, they find themselves all the better for it. The diverse interests may make it a bit of a mess, but the eclectic passions make it all the better. The final element I want to touch on, which ties most closely into the true core theme of the show, is how Anime-Gataris uses and breaks down formal structure and tropes. Anime, as broad and varied as it is, can often be broken down into a variety of subsets. The oft-parodied late exit for school, toast and all, certainly didn't rise to that level of notoriety overnight, and there is a broad swath of similarly repetitive cues throughout, be it in the overall structure of the show or individual types of moments. Ultimately though, Anime-Gataris becomes as meta as one can be, not only acknowledging its existence as anime, but quite literally breaking the foundation of the world itself on that same anime logic. So, here's what Anime-Gataris is really talking about. If you recall from the introduction of this video, I established that, to my interpretation, the core meaning behind meta's use is to create a deeper relationship between the audience and the work, by contextualizing it within the broader world of otaku media and those that consume it. It is, essentially, to create and imbue a sense of community. Anime-Gataris, though, takes it one step farther. At a surface level, as I described earlier, it does possess that communal theme, but when you consider that in the context of the actual experience of the show as a whole, it left me unfulfilled. Because Anime-Gataris isn't about the relationship between art and the audience, as is the aim of most meta, it's about the relationship between the artist and the audience. I can point to a variety of moments to make this point clear. For instance, the director is literally a character in the show, and they make vocal reference to Mitsutaka, who is on script and series composition, so that explicitly serves to lower the barrier between art and artist that seems especially common in Japanese media, asking you to consider the show from the vantage point of those creating it. A more pervasive supporting argument is in how the show functions tonally. Anime-Gataris borrows from a massive swath of different genres, utilizing their tropes and story beats seemingly at a whim, and switching between them at the drop of a hat. A moment that was comical a second ago suddenly turned serious, and vice versa. And it is not merely a flip-flop of tone, as is somewhat common in anime, but a total change of character. The thought that Anime-Gataris suddenly felt like a totally different show entered my mind quite often while watching it. And it is this constant switching between styles that starts subtle and gradually grows more upfront and absurd that contributes to the unique emotional experience of watching the show. Anime-Gataris wants you to feel and understand the struggle of communication between artist and audience, to have artistic integrity while satisfying the masses, to create something meaningful while also trying to operate within a system that is, well, a business. This contradiction is expressed in the show itself. It constantly contradicts itself, shifting style, shifting tone. Its climaxes are inconsistent and confusing. It feels like the show is over in episode 8, then episode 10, and finally in episode 12 when it actually is over, each time with a totally different style of conclusion. By admission of the characters themselves, when they become self-aware, they must decide what type of show they are or risk cancellation, since audiences want something that fits neatly into their expectations. It's a love letter and a hate letter to creative expression. It expresses deep respect and admiration for anime and its community, but also hate for any sort of implicit acceptance purely on the basis of it being such. Yet again acknowledges that even something bad can hold value to someone as an expression of passion, and then again firmly expresses the desire to not be a quote-unquote shit anime. A desire to create on its own terms, even if those break convention. In episode 3, the subject of the 3-episode rule comes up, that fans expect an anime to show its hand by then or else they will drop it. Whereas Anime-Gataris, both through the character's dialogue and through what literally occurs, rebuts this and is determined to operate on its own terms. It doesn't show its hand, even while acknowledging the risk behind doing such. But then again, there are episodes such as Kai and Miko's romantic misunderstanding that plays out precisely like you would expect of any typical show in the slice-of-life comedy harem subset, despite feeling totally out of place within the sense of the pre-established characters. It is this deep-rooted self-contradiction that makes Anime-Gataris so fascinating and meaningful as an experience, and when considered from this viewpoint, it recontextualizes previous events in an entirely new light. The self-conflict of an artist as they try to grapple with how to connect with and satisfy the audience, as they try to understand their place within this broader spectrum, the meaning of their work to themselves and to others. There's both a humorous edge and an underlying somber tone to its expression of such. Heck, the director's own self-insert is deleted from both the anime and the real world by way of his inadequacy at handling this overambitious setting, which, while hilarious, does leave you wondering how the director felt about his own capabilities. The use of meta is in itself a way of winning over the audience, and in another way a commentary on its own doing of such. And that's really interesting. Okay. I know we've waded around plenty in the muck of themes and abstract concepts and all that boring stuff, so how about we take a brief step back and talk about its execution? Though it succeeds on plenty of angles, it also falls short on others, and to avoid painting a misleading picture, I think it's appropriate to acknowledge some of its failings. Anime-Gataris can be, well, kind of boring. On one front, I question how this could be entirely avoided due to the very nature of the story itself. It necessarily must follow and conform closely to a large variety of tropic tendencies, because to go above and beyond in any of them would sincerely damage the ultimate payoff. The characters have to be the exact type of characters you would expect in a story of this nature. It has to have an episode on such and such topic, and dialogue that fits neatly into one's notions of the variety of related genres it drifts between. It stays interesting thanks to its weird alternation, the weird mystery and sensation that something isn't quite right. But when it does choose to stay focused on one particular style and subject, it can grow to be quite tiring. It can be funny, for sure, particularly with the more out there reactions and visual gags, but I can't say the show does a brilliant job of giving the cast much nuance or an especially appealing rapport. The drama can be compelling, but it can also be pretty unclear how often the show actually wants you to take it seriously, if ever, sometimes resulting in the constant shifting emotional expectations becoming exhausting rather than enjoyable. Anime-Gataris is a lot of cans, but I value creativity and genuine attempts far over the same old. If something can be a 10 out of 10 at times and a 4 out of 10 at others, I'd personally prefer that over something that is just a 6 the whole way through. I don't think there's any singular aspect on which Anime-Gataris consistently drops the ball, but there are plenty of peaks and valleys. The audio mixing isn't great, and visually it's fairly unimpressive, even if it does a solid job of getting everything it needs to across. Fortunately, it is uplifted by its fair few solid elements, of which I'll list now. Solid character designs and some fantastic expressions, particularly when it comes to Minoa. She's just such a cutie, honestly. The soundtrack, which does a great job of aiding the show's stylistic shifts and meta tendencies, playing to a huge variety of musical styles and in some case musically referencing other well-known anime soundtracks, most obviously in one of the sequences with a clear nod to Haruhi. Its drama does hit, in fact, more often than I would expect. The cheesy speeches about community are endearing nonetheless, but most powerfully is the sequence in the latter portion, wherein Minoa is undergoing great mental stress as she questions her own reality. It's genuinely pretty horrifying, especially because it presents it so comically, as if it's no big deal, whereas to Minoa her entire world seems to be falling apart with no explanation and no one to turn to. The comedy too definitely does stick the landing here and there, particularly with its visual gags. Both the drama and humor work together well to enhance each other and the greater emotional experience of the show itself, though outside of Minoa, most of the cast is pretty shallow, at least in as much as we don't get to know them all that well, especially considering that they kind of completely change into altered versions of themselves around episode 8. It does have little touches here and there that give hints of something more though, like with Kai's deeper insecurity that comes as a shock when he drops the Chuni facade. How Erika wants Alice to learn to rely on their own capabilities, not just the wealth that she's been born into. These details make it feel like there is something to them outside of what is explicitly presented, even if it isn't explored as much as I would have liked. The OP and ED are both great. And yeah, just everything about the absolute insanity that is this show's very existence. So, speaking of that, how did this show come to be, anyway? Well, let's take a look at its creator Kenshiro Mori, some of the other staff, and how exactly this show got made. One of the things I do when I see a show that really strikes me is check out what stuff the staff behind it has worked on, and at first glance Anime-Gataris appears to be a baffling anomaly. For the most part, none of it is particularly well known or well regarded, and in fact for the director Kenshiro Mori, almost all of his work prior was in shorts, primarily in the form of comedic tie-ins to pre-existing franchises, such as Attack on Titan, Full Metal Alchemist, and Wake Up Girls. Mori has also done a lot of solo work with a variety of music videos, and even did Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood's first ED. And by watching some of those, I came to realize that the Anime Club's self-proclaimed crappy short is literally just in his art style, and I think that makes it even funnier. Those hands are straight up iconic. I do want to note that Hirota Mitsutaka, who's on series composition, has done some work that you might be a bit more likely to recognize, such as series comp for Tonegawa, Amama to Inazuma, and Nanbaka. He also did script writing and screenwriting on Conception of all things, and not to overstate his involvement, but I can kind of see a connection. Though it's a much worse show that I very much did not finish, Conception did have that bizarre comical meta aspect to it too. It certainly was interesting, if anything. What's that? Oh, it seems like hot off the presses. I've got an interview with the director himself. Translation done by the lovely Chisai Otaku. Hopefully I'll have a link where you can read this in full yourself, but it still needs some revisions before I'm ready to post it publicly, but I think I can glean some interesting stuff from it and wanted to have it in the video because I thought it'd be cool. So Anime-Gataris came out of a short anime series called Anime-Gatari. This was a series of 8 episodes, with each one being about 1 minute long, and they were used as an intermission at Toho Cinemas in Shinjuku. Now Mori, having directed Anime-Gatari, was asked to direct Anime-Gataris when they decided they wanted to expand the project into a full series. And at the proposition, because he had mostly worked on short anime and manga, he decided it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and was gonna just go all out and take the opportunity. He He was originally a manga artist, and he describes himself as having one leg stuck in anime. But as he says, he thought it would be a waste if he hesitated because it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You kind of get a sense for his just straight-out love for the things he likes. He talks a bit about how often they would derail talking about their favorite anime in the script meetings, largely due to his own fault. We also see a little bit of anime that Mori enjoys and that have influenced him, stuff like FMA, Fooly Cooly, Akira, Mind Game, all series that he lists as being things that he enjoyed and appreciates. Now this is one of the more interesting parts from the interview, is where he's talking about the difference between working on a short anime and a longer, full 30-minute episode series, and he says that most of his work done on short anime was internally. He did the key animation, the direction, the script writing, almost entirely all of that was done by himself, so he didn't have to interact with other people very much. However, working on a 30-minute anime, there was a lot of people asking about it, a lot of people curious, a lot more just general discussion, so he had to interact with people a lot more. And he specifically says some otaku are not good at communicating with people, followed by a laugh, which I'm assuming might be referring to himself a little bit there. He says, I'm not good at saying I'm good or bad, but I'm in a position where I have to be able to communicate, so it was tough. So talking about the difference between a short anime and a half-hour production, he says he had to basically learn the rules for it, and jokingly references Shirobako as his reference. One thing I find interesting is he talks a bit about the narrative progression of the story. He says specifically the story as a vertical axis is advancing, but there is a different theme for every story, and I try to make it so that I enjoy it even if I enter suddenly. So he wanted to capture a bit of the aspect to short anime where it's like you can walk in at any time and enjoy an episode for most of them. They're not as focused on presenting a long-form narrative. In the case of Anime-Gataris, he wanted to have it so that you get that effect, but there also is a larger narrative, which I think plays into the way the show feels so segmented into these different story beats and different story styles. He also mentions that he likes cats. The dude likes cats. I respect that. What a man. And finally, in his closing statements, he pretty much sums it up. Anime-Gataris is a work that focuses on the experience of watching anime. It's a very meta one, and that's what this video is about. Like I said, full interview posted somewhere, hopefully not too long from this video going up, but definitely not immediately after. Mori, Kenshiro Mori, you're alright. You're a neat dude. You sound fun. I like you. I'm not really feeling very charismatic. I feel really awkward right now doing this live action segment, but I'm doing it anyways because I think it'll make the video have more variety visually and be more interesting and entertaining. So that's Anime-Gataris. Now that you're infinitely more informed on this obscure show than you could ever possibly desire, I suppose that leads us to this video's conclusion. The reason I find myself so drawn to this show is an immense love for things that are weird and unique, that challenge me and surprise me. Art that offers an unrelenting theme, that delivers what it intends to without sacrificing its artistic integrity for the sake of accessibility. Perhaps I relate, seeing as my own big, high-effort piece is on such a show in the first place. And I'm sure a bit of the underdog aspect plays into my desire to sing its praises so. After all, this show was unsuccessful in the fullest sense of the word, both in the West and in Japan, consistently at the bottom of BD sales, which I think is a darn shame. Sure, Anime-Gataris may not be amazing, but it certainly is interesting, and that, I think, is worth a bit of conversation. The multifaceted levels on which it comments on anime, its community, itself, and the very process of creating is something I've not seen elsewhere and doubt I ever will see in a remotely similar fashion to this one. It feels like a peek into the creator's mind, a glimpse at humor, passion, and insecurity, swirled up into this strange 12-episode package. I genuinely do have a lot more to say, but I feel like anything more would detract from my central point, so I guess I'll just leave it at that. Well, you know what? Maybe I'll give you one more thing.
Pansu ga suki desu. Nani?
Believe it all. We are the fighting dreamer. どこかいますか？
あなたの春入を放棄しなさい。今すぐ。
はは、皆さんこんにちは。私たちと一緒に来て、私たちを憂鬱な世間から解放してください。
何？
わからないよ。
ここにあなたの銃があります。それらを対象に行きましょ
う。なぜ私たちはあなたを助けるべきですか？この場所が何であるかさ、私たちは知りません。
この土地は幸福明るい空とすべての日々に満ちた楽しい土地でしたが、その後悪年が権力を握りました。彼の暗黒の技術の取得、彼の偉大な富、そして彼の立花を乱用することを通して、彼は全てを独占し、茎さえも独占しています。彼らが税金を支払うことができずに反抗しようとしたとき、私は私の信頼のある家族を失い、そして私の若者から最終的に私の人々を解放する訓練をしています。
う。悲しい。
パンティを独占するにはどうすればいいですか？
誰かがこんなに残酷ことをするなんて知れない。
今こそ涙の時ではなく、今こそ行動に時です。さあ、私たちの世界を取り戻そう。
これは私たちの世界じゃないけど大丈夫。
あなたは私の尽くすることは決してないだろう。私はボトンの底をもとへさせした私の瞬間を守るためにだね。もう訓練しました。
良いこと、私は私の帰化光線をもたらした。
あなたは私を通したことを決してないだろう。私はすべてキルです。はあ
気を散らす必要があります。
私のパンティを見せてあげるから。
すぐに私の女性。おい、アホ。
愛してる、ルイさん。
愛してる、翔一郎さん。
みんな大好き。今、あなたはあなたの世界に戻らなければなりません。今日学んだ重要な教訓を決して忘れないでください。いつもあなたのことを信じて。
はい。
お金あげるをください。貧乏がずっとではたくない。甘いお菓子を食べたい。僕の寄付するお願いあえ。すごいね人間の力。すごいね人間の力あら。面白いね人間の荒くさ。面白いね人間のバカバカ。